Half-Life Alyx has a lot to live up to. It's the first Half-Life game in over a decade, the first Valve game in a hot minute, and one of a very small select handful of AAA VR titles, but this is really the first AAA VR title from Valve, being one of the two big VR boys in the business. They did come out with the Lab, as well as a few other small experiments, but this is really their breakthrough to push their flagship headset, the Valve Index. And the real question is, can Half-Life Alyx pull it off? Can it satisfy Half-Life fans? Can it satisfy VR fans? And can it make a case for VR for everyone? These are the questions we're going to dive into and hopefully answer for you. But before we get into it, please consider subscribing. We'd really appreciate your support, and if you found this video helpful, please throw us a like. We should talk about the presentation of Half-Life Alyx first. This is AAA development done right. There are tons of assets, and they are all interactable, from fully functioning pianos to a camera on a tripod that you can move around, to markers that allow you to draw on multiple different surfaces and erase with your hands. There's always something to play with in almost every room of Half-Life Alyx. There's tons of environments, my particular favorite being a natural history museum that you get to roam through. And the voice acting is top-notch. Speaking of the voice acting, we should probably talk about the story. The story is fairly straightforward. You could probably explain it to someone in under 5 minutes, but it is essential to Half-Life in the Half-Life universe. And in essence, without spoiling anything, it seems like Half-Life is back in a big way, and we're going to be seeing more of it, which is a good thing. This is not a spin-off or an excuse to get Half-Life into VR. This is it. This is canon. This is big, and this is good. It's an enjoyable story. But all of this fluff, all of this presentation story doesn't mean much if the gameplay is lackluster, especially in VR. Does Half-Life Alyx succeed? Do the meat and the potatoes hold up? Well, let's just talk about a few things. And I'm going to talk about a few things. Some games have done one or more of these right, but Half-Life Alyx really is the culmination of a lot of these in an accessible way. The first thing are the gravity gloves. They are essentially force pull. It allows you to point to an object, and it allows you to just flick your wrist and the object will fly to you and you can grab it. There's a couple of things that make these exciting and fun. One, they just work. They work extremely well. Two, they're extremely satisfying to use. Three, a lot of times in VR, kind of some of the cumbersome stuff, like it's fun to rummage through things and explore like a house, but it's not that fun when you want to reach and grab something, but it's right outside of your play area and you see the barrier come up that says, oh, you can't go any further, you're going to hit a wall. So then you have to kind of reconfigure yourself and re-teleport and then go to grab the thing. That's gone with the gravity gloves. Now, if you do hit that point, you can always just use the gloves. Otherwise, it's super fun and super quick and super efficient to loot things, to explore things. I honestly don't know how we're going to go back to other VR games without these. I think it's going to become a standard in VR. And going back to what I said earlier, some games like, I would say Superhot kind of has a primitive gravity glove where if you eliminate one of the polygonal foes, the weapons pretty much just go to you. But this is much more nuanced, much more controlled. Locomotion is the next thing I want to talk about in the gameplay department. I personally suffer from VR sickness. I still have problem doing free roam games, but I also have problems sitting in my trolley commute to work, which is 15 minutes, and looking at my phone. I'm just that kind of person. I have problems with this. It's always been a problem, but I do love VR and I do love locomotion options. This is what makes something like Boneworks extremely hard for me to play. Half-Life Alyx has 3 locomotion modes. There's the traditional teleport, there's the traditional free roam, which is like your normal first-person shooter, and there's a new mode kind of new. Again, some games have done these things, but this is kind of the culmination of all these working really well together. And that is a combination of teleport and free mode. You're basically teleporting, but instead of your screen going black, you see yourself move forward very quickly. And between these three modes, like I said, I suffer from VR sickness, no problems, no illness. It's pulled off very well. You know where you're going. They don't move you too fast, and you're never really pushed to your limit. You're never asked to do too much. That being said, they do ask you to do more as far as moving quickly as the game progresses, but it's totally fine, and I really think that VR locomotion is a non-issue at this point. Teleporting works if you're prone to sickness, free movement works if you're not, and now there's this middle mode which works even kind of is the happy middle, I would say, for most people. And then let's talk about the combat. So this is very much a first-person shooter, and the first-person shooting is done with 3 key weapons which can be upgraded. What's really satisfying is the reloading of these. They are not super realistic like Padlov, but they're realistic enough. Like, you want to pull that chamber on your pistol when your magazine's loaded. If you want to not do that and save that extra step, then eject your magazine with a bullet left in the chamber and pop the new one in. It's that kind of thing that really keeps you engaged. Reloading is extremely engaging, and in the roughly 15 hours it took to beat the game, reloading did not get old, and the guns did not get old. Even though there's only 3, you do upgrade them over time with some pretty satisfying ways to upgrade. I heard the laser pointer can kind of take the fun out of the aiming, so I opted to not get the laser pointer for any weapons, just passing on that advice. Next are the puzzles. So if we were to compare Boneworks to something like Breath of the Wild, where it is fully dependent on its physics system, and this is not that. This is closer to a more traditional set puzzles. They're done in a couple ways. There's some procedurally generated mini games that you can do. There's also some scripted puzzle solving where you're essentially trying to turn power back on. And then there are some light physics puzzles. Less physics and more interacting with objects to accomplish goals, but in a fun, satisfying way. And there were a few that left me stumped for a couple minutes, but never so stumped that I got frustrated. It is fun and satisfying to solve true VR puzzles in VR. Like, you're in the world, and it's almost like doing an escape room over and over and over. And yeah, I wasn't disappointed in the puzzles. That being said, and I'm going to start shifting into the critique right now, if I had to critique the gameplay, I think they had the physics system there, and they could have put a little bit more trust into it. I think there could have been a compromise between Boneworks' totally free-form puzzle solving and Half-Life's more scripted puzzle solving, and there could have been all of these really honestly good Half-Life puzzles with the added benefit of the physics system. Not even anything crazy, even something as simple as moving crates to allow you to jump on things, which a little bit of that is in this game. And it seems like later in the game they trust you a bit more with things like that. But in general, I think that could have been something that could have been improved. Another thing, when your health is on your wrist, it's a bit finicky. It's hard to know exactly how much damage you're about to take. And when you're down to 1 heart, you do get an audio indicator that you're down to 1 heart. But when you're down to 2 hearts, you don't get anything. And in a game that has actually really good audio feedback, for example, if you're down to 3 magazines in your pistol, Alyx will say 3 mags left. Or if you're out of ammo on your machine gun, she'll say nothing left, something along those lines. It would have been helpful to have her say something when you get down to 2 out of your 3 hearts. If she says, "Oh, that hurt," or something like that, just so that you're aware that you're down to 2 hearts, because I found myself dying. I only died a handful of times, but when I did die, I almost never died at 1 heart because I knew I was at 1 heart. I did die at 2 hearts because I didn't know I was at 2 hearts. So that's a minor nitpick. And the last thing I'll say is mix up the enemy types. There's really about 4 enemy types, and sometimes they have 2 of them in the same scene. I would have liked if they could have maybe all of them, and it does seem to it seems to peel itself back towards the end of the game again, and I just wish that they had introduced all of the enemies a bit earlier and integrated them into the gameplay as big groups later or earlier in the game, because they're so fun to fight, and once you throw them, and each one provides a different element, each one keeps you on your toes. A head crab, you're gonna want to prioritize because one, they're creepy and gross, and they're jumping at your face, so you naturally in VR want to handle them first. That could be a vital distraction to handle the head crabs while the Combine are shooting at you. It's that kind of ebb and flow that they could have worked on a little bit and mixed up the enemy variety more. And I will just say, the last hour of this game, wow, seriously, some of the most fun I've ever had in a video game. Definitely in a long, long time, especially in a single player game. I was sweating, I was fully invested, and I had an ear-to-ear grin. So I guess that brings us to the conclusion. Did Valve do it? Hell yes, Valve did it. This sets several standards for VR. This sets physics standards and modeling standards, what parts of the body should be modeled, how the amount of physical objects and how they should interact with each other, and what should be expected of the player and how they can interact with those objects. This sets, like I said, a new standard for interactability. If there's a piano, you shouldn't just be able to look at it, you should be able to play it. If there's a camera on a tripod, you should be able to move that tripod. If there's a creature in a glass, you should be able to feed it with the food next to that. All of this helps with the immersion. Locomotion, the new standard, in my opinion, has been set. You can roam a world in VR without getting motion sickness, in my opinion, and the gameplay has all of it coming together. The puzzle solving, the combat, the story, the presentation, all the interactability has made a new standard for first-person narrative-driven games. This really does feel like the Mario 64 of VR, where we still have so much more to learn, but so much is done right that the new bar is set, and that's the bar that everyone's going to be shooting for in the future. Mario 64, we saw what could be done in 3D games with tight 3D movement and creative level design and just fantastic presentation, and this is that in VR. This is essential for VR players. This is essential for Half-Life fans, and this is essential to video game fans and players. Buy Half-Life Alyx. I fully endorse this game. I love this game, and I hope you love it too. If you like this review, we have plenty of VR content to check out. There's plenty of reviews to check out, and there's plenty of content on this All Things Gaming channel. Thank you, and I will catch you next time.